Good afternoon. This is Dr. David A. Paget. This is the second segment of the May 6th Urban Geography class for Maymester 2021 at Tennessee State University. So for this portion of the class, I'm going to uh, present to you this presentation entitled Democratizing Geospatial Technology, a model for providing technical assistance in community-based participatory mapping to environmental justice stakeholder communities. And so this presentation will kind of lend purpose to the class assignment and looking at it from the lens of some real world examples, and will also shed light on some of the issues that are facing communities all over the country. And of course, we're a historically Black college university, and so we're going to focus upon Black communities a lot. So just, okay, so I'm gonna get started here. Okay, is everybody able to see that? I know that yesterday at the Stanford thing, I had some issues. Is everybody able to see this presentation on the screen? Yes. Can we see the presentation? Can you all
Yes,
see the
sir.
presentation? Oh, okay, okay. All right. I know yesterday it didn't show up right away. Okay, so so as I mentioned, part of what I do as an outreach arm of the Tennessee State University Geographic Information Sciences Lab is provide technical assistance in the form of geospatial technology for communities all over the United States, mostly in the Southeast and East Coast. So in this picture that you see, this is, I'm in Gulfport, Mississippi. Actually, I'm at Gulfport High School, but they meaning the high school, has a nice GIS lab. And so I was using their GIS lab to do a asset mapping training for a variety of community-based organizations. Again, the main sponsor was the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice that is based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And another sponsor was the Ethical Geo program, which is a program of the American Geographical Society. And so then, of course, Tennessee State University. And so this is just some background on the Ethical Geo project. So what I mean by democratizing geospatial technology is that, you know, when I first started out, we were doing paper maps. Maps were done on paper with pen and ink, light tables, and so on and so forth. And then we had something called computer cartography. So cartography is the art and science of map making. So computer mapping came along, but that still wasn't geographic information systems. By the time I graduated from college in the 1980s, we started to begin to see the very beginnings of GIS, Geographic Information Systems. The federal government had a program called GRASS. And so it was a platform used to map federal land. So that's the first time I really started to get involved in some degree with geographic information systems. At I think I was maybe 21 years old, right out of college, working for the federal government in California. So during that time, GIS, the technology, was largely in the hands or largely used by government, industry. It wasn't really in schools like you saw at Gulfport High School. I mean, that wasn't happening. I mean, the technology was not very user-friendly at all. But then over time, it began to get more and more user-friendly, but it is not, as you all will find out soon, it is not entirely user-friendly. I mean, you all are relatively well-educated college students, and you're probably going to have some challenges with this software. But the people that I work with in communities all over the country are people who might be a crossing guard at a high school, or might drive a bus for the school, or might be cab driver, might drive a city bus, might work in a grocery store, right? And so, but it's those stakeholders who now are wanting to use geographic information systems as a tool to empower them to solve community-based problems, all kinds of community-based problems. But the issue is, okay, so a lot of tools such as ArcGIS Online are freely available as an open source software. So the cost isn't the issue, unless you're talking about needing the, computing power capable of running the software. But other than that, the access is readily available to most people, but can they use the software? Are they able to use the software in applications that can help them solve their community problems? Um, so a lot of my work involves getting this technology in the hands of communities and empowering them to solve their community-based issues or to improve their communities or whatever it is that they want to do. There are some who say that the learning curve for geospatial technology is perhaps too steep for laypersons and novices to be able to effectively use it. So this project is all about changing that, is democratizing geospatial technology. One of the things that I wanted to change is, in many cases, organizations, well-meaning organizations, come into these communities to do asset mapping or some other kind of mapping. But oftentimes the community stakeholders end up being spectators. They're not innately involved in the process. They are on the map, but they're not part of developing the map. And in some cases, communities have been part of these mapping projects and completely lost control of any of the data that were collected. Some professor at a university has all the data, or some consultant has all the data. So this project has the objective of changing all that. And so this is these pictures are from the Overtown community. I guess you can see the historic Overtown community, a Black community in Miami. And so this is a community walkthrough. This is where we first walked through to get the assets, on the ground information. And so what's happening? Okay, is everything okay?
Welcome back, Professor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Back.
Okay, did I disappear for a while?
Yeah, you
Yes,
did.
like you're frozen.
Oh, I was frozen. Wow, Comcast, it's part of the conspiracy. So I guess I'll start over again. Can everybody see the screen?
No, it's on you.
No, yeah, we see you.
Oh, okay. Let me wow. All right. Let's start this over again. Here. Okay.
It was only frozen for like, 2 minutes.
Let's see. So it's still recording. Great.
What?
All right. And see, and we're back. Okay, so wow, that was a lot. Let's see, what did you all see? Did you see the first slide?
We made it to the second slide, but it's kind of froze like towards the end.
Oh, towards the end of the second slide. Oh, okay, so that's fine. Okay, so here we have the framework for the project. Of course, I'm the head of the framework, and then down at the bottom are the various community-based organizations that I've been working with in various places throughout the country, including Mobile, Alabama, and Washington, D.C., and Houston, Texas, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I learned, I've been doing this for a while, and so by this I mean training people in how to use geospatial technology who are not experts. One of the things that I learned is that the older people get, the less skilled they are at using the technology. Just as someone pointed out to my old self a few minutes ago, old Dr. Paget is old. He could let us scroll through the screens, which, you know, is fine. It's no problem. You know, that's probably true. But, you know, younger people have never known a time when this technology didn't exist. You know, you've never known a time when there weren't cell phones. You've never known a time when there weren't teller machines. Yeah, you know, there was a time, I remember when there were no teller machines. You're like, well, how did you get money, Dr. Paget? Well, you got paid every week, and banks on Fridays would stay open till like 9 o'clock at night because everybody got paid on Friday. And so you'd have to go to the bank with your paycheck. There was no electronic deposit. You take your check, you go stand in that line at the bank, because if you didn't cash your check at the bank by the time that bank closed on Friday, you didn't have any money for the weekend. You couldn't go to a teller machine and get money. No, you cash your check. You stand in line at the bank till 9 o'clock at night to get your check cashed. And so, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have cable TV. We had 5 channels on the TV set, and they went off at night. We didn't even have remote control. I was the remote control. David, get up and change the channel. David, turn on the game. David, get up and turn on the game. I was the remote control. You know, so now we fast forward to this age where we have all this technology that's just crazy to a lot of older people. The problem is, or the issue is, that all these organizations that I work with, you saw Mr. Womack yesterday. That's the age of most of the people in these organizations. They're aging baby boomers, 50, 60 years of age and older. They're retired. They're still relatively healthy. They want to be involved in community change. They're very educated, very experienced. They bring a lot of resources to the table. But when you put them in front of some technology, it's like, whoa, wait. You know, I don't know about this, Dr. Paget. I don't know if I can do this. I mean, it's very intimidating to older people, all this technology. And I have a confession to make. You know, this still is my phone. This is a flip phone. Some of y'all might not know this is not a pager. You know, this is a flip phone. This is still my phone. And the only reason I have an iPhone is because of COVID. And I got this iPhone last fall. It's an 11. And I'm still trying to figure out how to use the thing. But I didn't want to have anything to do with these. You know, I like this. Nobody's going to steal this. You know, nobody's going to knock me in my head and take this. You know, they might knock me in the head and because I have this. Man, we thought you had something valuable. You got this flip phone. So, but it's convenient. So I'm just like some of these people. I can't understand all of this. You know, it's just too much. I mean, there's all kinds of you know, there's all these apps and things, and people can track you on this phone. You know, they can put a tracking device on the phone and track you. You know, there's all kinds of odd things on these phones. So a lot of the older people who might want to learn geospatial technology have a hard time. And so part of my model is to bring young people in that I call youth mappers. Now there is a larger youth mapping initiative or youth mapper initiative that was created by Dr. Patricia Solis, who's a geographer. I don't want to take her credit away. I just use the name youth mapper because oftentimes when I go to these meetings, a lot of the younger people, they aren't saying anything, they aren't participating, they're there, but the elders, you know, we kind of suck all the air out of the room, and the younger people are just sitting there until I say, well, we're going to do some mapping, we're going to use some GIS, we're going to use some global positioning systems, we're going to use some mobile apps. Now the young people have agency. The young people say, well, I know how to do that. I can put the I can put the so this is a GPS. This is an app that kind of makes your cell phone mimic a global positioning systems receiver. It's called Where Am I At? And it just shows you, that doesn't look, just gives you your latitude, longitude from wherever you are. Boom, put that on your mobile device, and we can do some community-based participatory mapping. There's something in business and that you'll learn later on. It's called being scalable. And it's a simple way of saying you can't do everything by yourself, right? So notice I had a Tennessee State University graduate student, Olivia Harbison, who was the liaison. So she's a master's student in the College of Agriculture, and she's a GIS, pretty good using GIS. So she served as the liaison between the young people and me. And that took a lot of weight off of my shoulders. So as you move forward in business, remember that word scalable. It means get help. So this is the structure, this is the framework. And this framework is presumed to be replicated by other people doing this work all over the country, if not all over the world. Okay, so again, the technology that we use is open source in many cases, ArcGIS Online. I prefer, if community-based organizations can afford GPS receivers, to use actual GPS receivers. The one pictured here, this Garmin unit costs about $180, which in some cases isn't a whole lot of money for community-based organizations. And in some cases, I'm able to buy the technology myself through grant funding. And the reason I prefer GPS receivers is that's all the GPS receiver is doing, is getting absolute locations. Your mobile device is doing 800 different things. You're texting, you're calling, you're watching movies, who knows what's on here, right? And that can interfere with the GPS radio signal sometimes. So this is in Pensacola, Florida. And I think I mentioned that one of my undergraduate assistants graduated there. That's Joey Batch. Yes, Ms. That's her name. Her name is Joey. But she just graduated Saturday, leaving an opening in my lab. And this was from like 2 years ago. So she spent a lot of time in the lab, going to various communities with us. This is another one of my students, Aaliyah. So she graduated a couple of years ago, but she was also part of the team. And so you can just look around the room at the people at this training, and you don't see anybody without gray hair, do you? Like I said, most of the people that we work with are older. And so we have to be patient, but you have to believe that they can learn this technology. So a little background, I spent a lot of years doing what I call pathology mapping. In other words, mapping pollution sources in communities, mapping crime in communities, mapping where all the liquor stores are in communities, and so on and so forth, where all the illegal dumps are in communities. So I call that pathology mapping. But as I started to work more and more with communities, they started to ask, well, what about mapping the good stuff? Not everything is bad here. Why don't we map some good land uses in our community so that we can replicate them? Maybe there's a really good playground in our community for children. How can we get more of those? Maybe there's a really good urban garden in our community. How can we have urban gardens in other parts of our community, and so on and so forth? So it's taken a more positive look at land uses in our communities rather than negative, so that we can then build upon and accentuate the positive. So it's really a different mindset that we have to take on. So this picture is when I was working in the Buzzard Point neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And so this is a relatively moderate to low income community. And in the past several years, Washington has built the Nationals baseball stadium and the, I don't know what the name of their soccer team is, but there's 2 stadiums now in that neighborhood. And so I don't know if you remember from yesterday, I was talking about this term called green gentrification. There's another term that I call commercial gentrification. So there's residential gentrification is when people buy high price residential property in lower income communities, raise the tax base, people get priced out, apartment owners sell their buildings, kick the renters out. Eventually the whole community changes over to something nothing like it was before. If we were in class, we would go over to a community called Salem Town in Nashville. It's also, you might call it Germantown. And it's a very white, upscale, exclusive community. I'd say 10 years ago, that community, as some people might say in slang, was the hood, or we might say it was straight hood. And within 10 years, it's completely changed to a gentrified, mostly white community. And so that's what's happening at Buzzard Point. As these sports venues were built, we started to see the encroachment of more and more expensive housing and so on and so forth. And there's actually been discussions of taking the entire Buzzard Point community, many of these people live in public housing, and just completely removing them to someplace else so that higher priced housing and businesses can come into the area. And I don't know what that neighborhood looks like now. This was a couple of years ago. Who knows? I mean, people were selling out left and right. So the first thing that we do is we don't get engaged with the technology right away. I mean, like I said, you all are young, you like technology. Older people, I'm not going to put a GPS receiver in their hands right away. So the first thing that we do is do a no tech, not low tech, no tech. We just walk the community. And a lot of people, a lot of us, as I mentioned before, we don't walk around our neighborhoods. We drive through. We don't look at anything when we're driving through except the steering wheel. But if we walk through our communities, there are a lot of good things in our communities that we might not ever see if we drive through. So here I am with some of the local community stakeholders, and we're just walking the community, taking notes, doing everything paper and pencil, very no tech. Then later on, we start to get involved with the GPS receivers. And so what the objective of this mapping assignment in the Buzzard Point neighborhood was looking for resources, after school programs, reading programs, just looking for places where people in the community who are still going to be there can get some support. And then secondly, of course, was to look for opportunities, job opportunities, employment, those types of things. Those are the main assets that they wanted to map. So here's an example of what we might call a change in our mindset. Now, a lot of us, when we walk through our neighborhoods, if we were to see a vacant lot like this, and this is right on Jefferson Street, and again, ordinarily, had we had this class in person, we would have gone on an asset mapping walk up Jefferson Street. And so that's where we would have spent one class a day, just outside, engaging in an actual asset map exercising, and then taking the assets that we saw and putting them on a map. So a lot of times when we see a vacant lot, we think, oh, this is blight, this is a vacant lot, it's an eyesore. But, well, I'll toss the question out to you all. What else could this be here? What else could be on this vacant lot other than nothing? Anything else be here? You've been down Jefferson Street. What else could be here that would benefit the community?
Tutoring center.
Okay, true. Yeah, you could have, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are looking for anything to get their children a leg up in terms of education. Anything else?
Honestly, like a grocery store or something. I know we have one not too far, but one closer would be more beneficial.
Yeah, a grocery store, even, but you know, you all are, I mean, okay, that's true, but that, okay, let's scale it down a bit. That costs a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah, or maybe like even like a market or something like where people can get like fresh produce or something. Because I know that area, if you think about it, we are kind of in of a food desert because we have resources, but you kind of have to, it's not in walking distance. You have to drive or catch the bus. So something like a market or somewhere like you can get fresh produce or something like that would be beneficial.
yeah, you could have, like I said, yeah, pop-up market or something like that. I actually was involved with the project with Meharry Medical College, and a few years ago, and we it was a food desert. It was a food desert remediation project. I'm trying to think of another word beside remediation, but that's the best word I can think of right now. Intervention. It was a food desert intervention project funded by the Centers for Disease Control. And yeah, our intervention was pop-up markets. And it didn't work out too well. I'll talk when we start talking about food deserts. I think we get to food deserts next week. I'll talk about what happened with that project. But yeah, I mean, now one thing that might prevent this property from being utilized is that maybe it's private property. So clearly you see the fence up around the property, which basically kind of says keep out. So a lot of times people don't realize that there are ways to leverage resources such as vacant property. A lot of times these properties are what we call absentee landlords. So let's say this property is in Nashville. The person who actually owns it lives in Fort Myers, Florida. You know, maybe the person retired, moved down to Florida, and still owns it, but this is the situation. Yes, Cameron, you have a question?
I was just gonna mention something else that could be used for that area, just because, like, I know in other universities, like I'm from Memphis, so U of M has a lot of like affordable student housing for their like nearby students or whatever. And like for instance, like even my friend, she goes to Austin P. Like they have a system where when they get like their refund checks, if they get it, it just applies directly to their housing. So they don't have to worry about paying for rent or anything. And I know like sometimes, I know we have House of God, but if we're being honest, House of God really isn't that nice. But I feel like we don't really have any like off campus affordable student housing. Like you have to move out towards like Bellevue or Antioch, but we like other places have good affordable housing like around their campuses, and we don't necessarily have that. Like the ones that are like down the street are like thousands of dollars a month. So that's another thing I feel like should be introduced or something that could be used in that little area right there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, well, maybe before COVID, the university was actually moving in the direction of purchasing housing, but it's the money issue. So if you look at the University of Memphis, they are a larger institution. They have, they're a research-based institution. They have, they used to be Memphis State University, and the reason the state got taken out of the name is that I think they've almost completely become an institution that is not supported by state funding. I'm sure they still get some. That's why it's no longer Memphis State University. Now they're just the University of Memphis. They don't, they make enough money through research projects and whatever else to be independent. And so money is really the issue here. And Tennessee State University, we are 70% supported by tuition, only 30% from state funds, right? And I'd say maybe 10 years ago, we had about 9,200 students. Now we might be at about 8,000. So we've been precipitously losing students over the past at least 10 years. And so if we're 70% supported by tuition dollars and we start to lose students, guess what? That takes money, a lot of money out of the university's operating funds. So, and then of course, you probably heard we've been getting robbed for the past 40 years. I mean, Reverend Harold Love found out that the state of Tennessee admittedly owes us, meaning Tennessee State, about $500 million. I mean, a settlement was just made with historically Black colleges and universities in Maryland, the same kind of thing. So there are 4 public Black colleges in Maryland, 4 public Black HBCUs in Maryland. They collectively are owed $577 million due to racism and past discrimination. Tennessee State University by itself is owed about $500 million just by itself. So that kind of thievery, I'm not gonna, what else can you call it? You kind of can see why we might have some infrastructure problems. You can see why one lightning strike had, the university jacked up for almost a whole year from a lightning strike, right? It takes funding and resources to engage in that kind of development. And we just don't have it. Like I said, between the state stealing money from us, between the fact that we're losing students, and we're not losing students because there's something wrong. A lot of it has to do with demographics. If you look at the demographics of this country, we had the baby boomers boom. That was 1944 to 1964. The fertility rate was 4. So that meant during that period, the average woman had 4 children, right? Then the 1960s came along, you had birth control pill that cut the fertility rate in half. Now the average woman has less than 2 children because now women can choose whether or not and when they become mothers, right? But still, the baby boomer generation was so big that even though we had a contraction with Generation X, then here comes the millennials, the children of the baby boomers. Now they have now surpassed the I think there's almost 80 million baby millennials now. So they have now surpassed the baby boomers in numbers. But now are the millennials having kids? No. So now what's happening is we're seeing this contraction in population as we get into the younger and younger ages. And we're starting to see that now with Generation Z. So the millennials were Generation Y. With Generation Z, now we're seeing less and less and less young people. And now Generation Z is maybe if you're 21, 22 years of age and younger, you're in that generation. You're not a millennial, right? And so with that generation being smaller and smaller, now college and universities are having to compete for a smaller and smaller pool of students, then add into that the financial economic collapse of 2009, from which Black people still have not recovered. Still have not. Oh man, I can go on about that. Which of course means less money for children or young people to go to college who happen to be Black, when HBCU. So all those things combined have resulted in us having less and less students, which means less and less money, which means we just don't have the disposable income to go out and buy apartment houses. I mean, I wish we did. It's just not the case. Until maybe we get some of this money back that was stolen from us by the state, until we get reparations for what was stolen from us. Every time I think about it, I just get angry. $500 million, and it took one of our graduates, Reverend Dr. Harold Love, to go there, become a state legislator, and actually do some work. And he found that money. And the state admits it. They're not saying that they don't owe the money. They admit, yeah, we kind of robbed TSU. Yeah, we did. But all right, where's the money? And this is how crazy it is. So this is all front page news. And Governor Lee, guess what is not in his budget this year? Money for Tennessee State University. This is how pervasive this racist, disrespectful practices on the state level against our institution. So yeah, now maybe if we get some of that $500 million, we might be able to start to buy some of the property around Tennessee State University.
No, it really is frustrating, because if you look at UT Knoxville and how developed their campus is compared to ours, it's like, and we're both funded by the state, so you can obviously tell that they're getting their money, but where it's like my mom, she went to TSU, and Wilson, she said that Wilson looks exactly the same when she went, and she's 50. So that just goes to say a lot.
Yeah, well, the University of Tennessee system, instead of getting less than the money it was supposed to, they got more than they were supposed to, substantially more than they were supposed to. So I wonder where the money TSU was supposed to get went. Right. So anyway, but I kind of burns me, anytime you just think, anyway, things are never going to be okay, but it's like, really? And then the sitting governor, anyway, forget, Governor Lee's, he is who he is. I mean, he signed the Nathan Bedford Forrest Day into law last year. It's his signature. This was the day after, or the week after, I think he met with President Glover. Don't get me started. And then he turns around, and you know who Nathan Bedford Forrest was, right? Founded the Ku Klux Klan. We have a state day, signed by Governor Lee, for the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. This is where you are in Tennessee. This was like maybe not last year, but the year before. This wasn't in 1955 or 1965, or even 1975. This was 2 years ago that your sitting governor signed off on a day honoring the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. So it's no wonder this governor decided not to put a single penny. Now we know that the state owes us $500 million, not a nickel in this year's budget. Anyway, let me just on some more, but that all is related to what we're talking about here. The reason that we see that we aren't able to do things like that is because of that. We, meaning Tennessee State University. The second thing that was mentioned was about where students live. So a few years ago, I was able to obtain a database of the anonymized addresses of every student and faculty member and staff member at TSU. And I made a map. And of course, as you would expect, very few people who work or attend TSU, other than those who live in the dorms, live in the neighborhood, right? But in my analysis, I determined that if 10% of the people that worked at TSU who live in Bellevue and Antioch and who knows where, if 10%, not all of them, if 10% of them were to live in the neighborhood around TSU, which is the way it used to be, that would economically transform the community around Tennessee State. Only 10%, but where are they gonna live? There's no affordable housing. And the housing that's being built now, I mean, I thought I would never ever see this. I mean, I've seen, and look, don't take this the wrong way, and this is being recorded, but it's a fact. I thought I'd never see the day when I'd see a lone young white woman jogging on Walter Davis Boulevard in the evening by herself. I'm thinking, wait a minute, times have changed. There was a time when white people wouldn't come anywhere near Tennessee State University. You know, oh, you don't want to go over there. It's dangerous. Now it's like, hey, these gentrifiers are just buying up these $300,000, $400,000 homes. There's $400,000 homes right across the street from the Torrance Hall parking lot. If you know where that parking lot is, where Highland Hall, that big one, and there's those new houses right there where you turn into that lot. Those houses are $400,000 each, right across the street from TSU. Y'all gonna live there? Heck, I can't even live there. You know, I would like to, you know, but anyway, but yeah, so there's a lot that's going on that is really muting development around Tennessee State University. Like I said, now hopefully we'll get some of these funds, and hopefully we'll get some of these funds, and and we will be able to invest in properties like this. So now this property is on Jefferson Street, and I'll be honest with you, I used to drive down Jefferson Street to work every day. I never noticed this was there until we walked around. I was like, and as you can see, this is what you call an underutilized property. Now, on one hand, we can look at this and say, oh my gosh, this is a blight on the community. Look at this broken down building. Look at this. This probably, who knows what's going on here. I'm sure that I think there might be a barber shop on the end, but other than that, there's an empty store lot. This is potential. Like someone said, you could have a reading after school program in one of these spaces. You could have who knows, lots of things. But it's so, as we used to say, maybe people still say this, it's so off in the cut, as people used to say. I used to drive right past it. I'm like, this, but actually at Morgan State University in Baltimore, actually my father's alma mater, Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, which is an HBCU, they have purchased I guess you could call this a strip mall, but they have purchased a property similar to this one. And so the students in the College of Business are actually going to open businesses and run businesses in that strip mall that was purchased by the university. Now Morgan State got a large grant to do that, but there's a possibility that we could, dance studio, hair salon, there's all kinds of things. And it's right there. I mean, this is literally a block off of the intersection between 28th and Jefferson. So here's an example of, I talked about, let me get into some case studies now. So I talked about how young people can be really helpful in this community-based mapping. So in New Orleans, so I work with a community organization in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, and New Orleans still floods. I mean, the city's below sea level, and they get more rain than we do. We meaning Nashville, get about 45 inches of precipitation per year on average. New Orleans gets about 60 inches of precipitation per year per average. Then, of course, there's the occasional hurricane and tropical storm. So I was working with the members of an organization in the lower Ninth Ward to create a map of what they call catchment basins. And so catchment basins might be called sewers in other places, but they're places where water will be able to run into pipes and not flood the streets, but they get clogged up a lot with garbage and sticks and who knows what. But the city of New Orleans doesn't have the human power to keep up with the clogged drains. So what these organizations in New Orleans have decided were wanting to do was create a adopt a catch basin program, so that organizations and individuals could be responsible for keeping the basins clean. It's the same thing as adopt a highway, right, or adopt a stream. But they had to have a map made, an asset map. These catchment basins are assets. And so I was trying to work with people my age and older to get this map done. It was not happening. What you will learn is that if you want to work with GIS, it's not something that you can work on today and then next month you start working on it again. It's something that you have to do every day, not every day, but constantly. And so when I would work with the older individuals, we'd have a workshop. It was virtual, and this was before COVID. Even though I've been down there a lot, but I couldn't just always be in New Orleans, even though I love New Orleans, but can't go down there all the time. But I wasn't getting done. I wasn't getting anywhere with the elders. So I said, look, just find me some young people from either Xavier or Dillard, just some 20-year-olds, just get me some 20-year-olds. And they did, they got me some young people, and we got the map done in 2 hours. These young people like you all, they had never used GIS in their lives, never heard of it. 2 hours on the phone and on a laptop, bam, got the maps knocked out. But this is the attribute data table that the young people created. And this is the report, this link here. I guess it's not a live link, but I did put this presentation on the course website under the module 1 schedules. So you can just download this, and then you'll see the full report made by one of the young people. So that's one case study. A second case study is, now this is a very interesting case study. So this is the Wedgwood community, and this is the community in Pensacola where you saw, I was leading that mapping workshop. So the Wedgwood community is a Black community in Pensacola, Florida, that is surrounded. If you notice these symbols on the map, that symbol says pit number 6, and where this circle is, and that circle, those are landfills. This community, this Black community, is surrounded by 13 open landfills and borrow pits. And you're wondering, it's talking about, when you speak of zoning, you're thinking, how in the world could you have open mines and landfills in the middle of a residential neighborhood? Well, at the time that a lot of these structures were started, people in that part of the country didn't have the right to vote. Well, they had the right to vote constitutionally. It just wasn't being enforced. So if you understand the Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1965, it wasn't as if Black people didn't have rights. Those rights were granted by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. They just weren't being enforced. So it's just like if we have laws against speeding, but if there's no police enforcing the law, against speeding, people will drive 150 miles per hour, right? Because they're thinking, hey, there's a law that says the speed limit is 55 miles per hour on this road. But if there's nobody out there enforcing it, people drive as fast as they want to. So in the South, even though clearly African Americans were, African American men, let's just be clear, were granted the right to vote. At some parts of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments granted citizenship, about all of that, abolished slavery. Even though that was on the books in writing, the Southern states weren't trying to enforce that. They were doing the exact opposite, right? And so during that time, zoning is a public policy. These Black people in this community couldn't do anything about having these landfills in their neighborhood. So it's unbelievable. I mean, I can show you some pictures maybe sometime during the semester. you can walk right outside of somebody's backyard into a huge landfills as big as TSU's campus. I'm not talking about some little hole. I mean, it's bad. Anyway, so we've been trying to help this community to right that wrong, and there's so many wrongs that, like I said, I've been working with this community for 5 years. So to make matters even worse, the county decided they were going to build a 4-lane highway straight through the Wedgwood neighborhood a couple of years ago, 2019. And so right before that, I had trained the people in this community in how to use maps and how to make maps, not necessarily using GIS, just how to understand what maps are. And so this is just one of the maps that I showed them. This is a map of topography, and the community stakeholders, and you might meet a couple of them, maybe not, but they went to the county commission meeting and they showed that if this highway was to go through the Wedgwood community, that all of the toxins from these landfills, once they were disturbed, would flow right down here to the south. So all the rich white people live here in the south. The Black people live in the north part of town. Once the county commission saw that, that was the end of the road project, right? And the $13 million that would have been used to build the road has now been converted to this community for infrastructural improvements. So this just shows the power of mapping and how communities can use maps to affect positive change. And I thought this was really a win. And let me emphasize, I was not at the meeting. These people did this themselves based upon that. I trained them, but they took the ball and ran with it and were actually able to affect positive change in their community. Now, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and this was one of the maps that I used. I was an expert witness in a lawsuit against this Northport property development. So Gulfport, Mississippi is right on the shore of the Gulf of Mexico, and the military and the Port Authority of Gulfport and the state of Mississippi all join one another to build this inland port facility right next to and adjacent to the historical Turkey Creek community. And so Turkey Creek is another one of these historically Black settlements that we find all over the country. So fortunately, the people of Turkey Creek found an attorney to represent them free of charge in order to fight the permitting. So the state had to grant a permit for this project to ever go forward. You can't just build stuff. You have to get a permit so it'll be legally sound. So the Turkey Creek community stakeholders sued the state. We went to trial, and I was one of the expert witnesses, and I used a series of maps. Now, it wasn't just me. Several of the maps that were created were created in collaboration with community members. One of the maps showed that the Turkey Creek community actually exists. And you might say, well, how is that? How would it not be on a map? Well, it's not on a zoning map, because the zoning map for this area right now has the Turkey Creek community zoned industrial. Again, you might ask, well, wait a minute, this is clearly a residential community. How could it be zoned industrial? Remember that, again, this is Mississippi. When the zoning designations were created, you better believe people in Mississippi didn't have the right to vote, didn't have a voice. So that community was zoned industrial. So the argument that the state is trying to make is that, oh, this is industrial land. We should be able to build on it. There are no people there. There's nobody really there. I mean, they said this in court. And then of course I showed them the map and said, and the one of the attorneys for the state said, well, don't you see a buffer? Isn't there a buffer? between the project site and the community. And I told her, where do you see a buffer on this map? I mean, I was on the stand. I said, with all due respect, can you show me the buffer? And she just shut her mouth because there wasn't anything she could say. I mean, when you put things on a map, there's very little that argument that can be made. Now, we lost the case. Remember, we were in Mississippi, a bunch of Black people trying to fight the state of Mississippi, the military. But the people of Turkey Creek were able to get an attorney. And so we're going to go to the appellate court next. So this isn't over. But this just shows you, again, the power of maps in fighting against some ills of the past. In this case, having this community zoned as industrial when it's clearly residential. But I don't know. But the state didn't expect to see myself and others as expert witnesses. They thought they were going to have just the people there, and they were going to be able to say, well, this is zoned industrial. Oh, we didn't know that, sir. And that would be the end of it. But then they got myself from Tennessee State University. We had another Black PhD from Texas Southern University. So we basically had, they called us an HBCU dream team of scientists who came down, and we had them on their heels. They were nervous. They were scared, especially when we showed up do the site inspection the first time. And so we were introduced. Here's Dr. Paget, here's Dr. Nance, here's Dr. Wright, and those people were like, whoa, and they huddled up. We didn't know they were going to bring all these HBCU professors down here. They weren't ready for that. Now we still lost because we were in Mississippi. They had home court advantage. We were in Mississippi. No offense to those of you who are from Mississippi, but Mississippi is what it is. Anyway. Then of course there's Africatown, and I don't have to go into too much details about this. So you all are now part of this project. So don't have to talk about this much more. So you all are gonna get as much information about Africatown as you can possibly imagine in the next several weeks. Well, 2 weeks. I'm also working with communities in Houston, Texas. So Houston is the largest petrochemical, the city that has the largest presence of petrochemicals in the country, oil and gas, chemicals, there's refineries all over the place. And so obviously you're going to have a lot of air pollution. And so so everybody in Houston, especially Black people, is concerned about air quality. And so what we're doing now is, in addition to the government air monitors, we're helping communities to place what we call low-cost air sensors. Obviously, the government monitors and more commercial air monitors cost between $150,000 and $500,000. Most community organizations can't afford those, but they can afford these low-cost air sensors. And so I just got another substantial grant to place air sensors in low-income communities all over the country. We're just starting that. I literally just got the money about 3 weeks ago. It's about $20,000. So we're going to start working on that. But what we have to do first is work with these community-based organizations to identify the optimal locations to put the sensors. And so that is what we're doing. If you look at this map here, this is the Pleasantville community. And so they already have some monitors up here on this map on the left. The map on the right is the particulate matter exposure risk to the community of Pleasantville based upon relative risk versus every other census tract in the country. And so the risk factor that's highest is in red, and you can see plenty of red and orange on this map. So this community is at great risk to exposure to particulate matter. Particulate matter 2.5 there are particles that are 2.5 microns in diameter. You really can't see them with the naked eye, but you can breathe them. People can breathe these particles in, and they adhere to the lungs They can cause, it can increase the advent of asthma attacks. They are also, meaning places that have high exposure to particulate matter 2.5 are also associated with greater mortality and greater mortality from COVID-19, because COVID-19 attacks the lungs. So it would make sense that if you have a place where people have greater exposure to particulate matter, they're going to have greater risk and perhaps mortality from from COVID-19. So that's another reason that we're doing this work. You know, the pandemic is still out there; it's not over. So we're still doing this work now. And of course, I've talked a lot about this Overtown. I said I was going to talk about the Overtown community in Miami. They are being encroached upon by gentrification. They're trying to enhance their heritage tourism capacity, get people to not only go to Miami Beach and South Beach, but also go over to Overtown and enjoy some of the history, enjoy some of the, there are a couple of Black-owned B&Bs, not Airbnbs. B&B stands for bed and breakfast. So there's some Black-owned bed and breakfasts in Overtown. So they want people to come, you know, stay in this Black community, eat in the restaurants, and bring dollars and jobs and opportunity to the community through heritage tourism. Essentially the same thing that's being done in Africatown. But the Overtown community took the story map that I made for them and took it to a completely different level. So here's a story map that I've made for them, or with them. I don't want to say for, with them. Here's the notes from the walkthrough, like I said, with, so it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people working together. So I built this story map, or we built the story map. And again, when the story map was presented to the community, a lot of the elders came out and said, oh, those aren't all the historical sites. What about this? What about that? And so now, or at some point, when you go to Overtown and you walk by one of these historical sites, you can use your mobile device, scan this QR code. Not only will you see more history about the site, you will also hear the voice of an elder giving you the first person information or report on what was happening at that location when it was actually functioning and viable back in the 50s and 60s and so on and so forth. And so this type of outcome is what we're hoping to do with the Africatown map that you're going to produce. So you all will create this base map as a start, and then eventually it might turn into this, it might turn into some kind of an interactive mobile app driven tour. But we have to do this part first for the content before we can build an app, a mobile app. And so you all will be working on that. But this actually happened last year with some of the work that I've done in Miami. And I think that's it for this part of the lecture. So I just wanted to share that with you, just to show you, you know, how this theory and a lot of the things that we learn in this class are actually applied in real world situations. And the main goal is to make communities better, stronger, and safer at the end of the day. Okay, so we are into the, we're about ready for a break now. So let's take a 4-minute break. It's 2:46. Let's come back at 2:50, and we're gonna do have a working session on the individual projects. And so you really want to be back here for that, because that'll get you a leg up on the individual projects. So I'm going to, so that is the end of the second segment for Urban Geography, May 6, 2021. We'll be back with the working session on the individual projects.